Well, good Sunday, everyone. It is Sunday afternoon here. Wanted to get on, do another video looking at kind of these next maybe 7 to 10 days here as we close out the month of May. We have had a couple severe weather days, but it's been overly a pretty quiet stretch here in kind of the middle part of May. Does look like that may be overly, maybe not necessarily a crazy amount of severe weather outbreaks or tornado outbreaks, but certainly more severe weather days look like they're going to be on tap here over the course of this week going into your Memorial Day weekend. So, did want to get on, talk a little bit about what that looks like in the long range, and then even a couple of these next couple days and maybe where those threat areas might be. So, looking here, kind of starting at the visible satellite across the continental United States here. Again, this is actively what's going on now. We can see little bit of some possibly severe storms up here in the Pacific Northwest. We've got a little bit of the jet stream kind of diving and digging down into the Washington, Oregon, kind of Idaho region. Then we've got almost some kind of monsoonal storms here across the Four Corners region and even into the Texas Panhandle. And then overly just kind of some beneficial rainfall for parts of the kind of Gulf Coast area. And then the other thing to note is we've got a little bit of a spin here in the atmosphere across the kind of around the Bahamas area, kind of that western Atlantic basin. The National Hurricane Center actually did put out an advisory here today that this is an area worth watching. Typically, hurricane season doesn't technically start until June 1st, so we're a little bit early. But I think it just goes to show that it's not going to be long before we're talking and certainly watching the tropics pretty closely as we get into those kind of peak season months of kind of the summer and then onward into the fall. So I thought that was kind of worth noting here as well. Now, when we look at just kind of the overall pattern, just kind of looking at forecast models and just the overall pattern for the United States here upcoming, what we can see is that as we move forward in time, again, we've talked about how this is those 500 millibar winds, so kind of the jet stream that's way above the surface. And this is what really controls kind of those large scale weather patterns. And so what we can see is we've got a little bit of this jet stream that kind of dives into the Pacific Northwest. Here, these, today, tomorrow, maybe a little bit into Tuesday as well. But much of the jet stream is way up north here across Canada and kind of the northeastern United States and a little bit here in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have any large scale systems, not any big troughs, anything like that that are digging across much of the US. And that's really been the main reason why we've been relatively quiet and no significant severe weather outbreaks. And as we kind of move forward in time here, what we see is that, yes, do things change? They do, but we don't really have any of those consistent big troughs or big jet streams that kind of move across the United States. It's going to be relatively off over kind of the Midwest and the Northeast of the US and pretty quiet across the central US here over these next even couple weeks. And so overall, we're not going to have some significant change to where we have, huge severe weather outbreaks. But one thing that is worth noting that I think has been a little bit more noticeable here recently is we are going to have this active kind of almost Pacific kind of jet stream here that's kind of a lower Pacific jet stream. It's not the main jet stream, but it does bring this moisture off of the Pacific kind of across Mexico and into not only a little bit of the desert southwest, but also the southern plains. And this is going to give us enough forcing that even though we don't have a large scale event on our hands, we certainly could have enough of this flow in those upper levels to not, give us a chance for certainly multiple days of maybe marginal severe weather. It's not going to be that, states on states are getting, severe storms and tornadoes, but could we see some severe weather across kind of the higher plains of, Texas and up in the panhandle on the Cap Rock? I think that is what we're going to be looking at. And kind of as we move forward in time, we can see that kind of consistently for several days going into kind of until that early part of next week, we're going to have this consistent flow coming out of kind of that Pacific area out really across the Baja Mexico. And so that's something worth watching here in the longer range pattern. And when we look overall at kind of what's going to be setting up here moving forward, this is a different website. I don't know if I've used this a whole lot, but I think it's a little bit easier to look at the moisture that we're going to be dealing with. So if we look at this is valid basically right now. And so right now across Texas along the coast, we've got 70-degree dew points. We've got 60s kind of, into the Texas Hill Country, almost up in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And then the panhandles, we've got kind of low to mid 50s dew points in place today. That's just enough moisture to get a couple of those storms as we saw here in the Texas Texas Panhandle. But as we move forward in time and we go into, let's say, tomorrow afternoon, so let's say Monday around 4 p.m., we do start to see a little bit better moisture here across the Panhandle. We've got, low 60-degree dew points, almost 60 degrees here, kind of almost mid 60s here along the Red River. So we will see a chance of some severe thunderstorms here across the Panhandle region. And certainly we can see that this overall environment, we just get better moisture across Texas and even up into kind of the southern parts of Oklahoma. And then as we move forward and we go to Tuesday and we look at, say, Tuesday evening, this is some pretty decent moisture that we're going to see really pumping from the Gulf Coast up into kind of this northwest Texas, kind of southwest Oklahoma, and even that kind of central and northern Texas panhandle. And what we see kind of setting up here is this is what we always refer to as that dry line, in that we've got dew points in the 30s and 40s out here, and we've got dew points in the 60, almost mid 60s just to the east here. The other thing worth noting are these little wind barbs right here. We can see that these are largely kind of coming out of the southeast or almost out of the due east here, kind of in that panhandle up against the cap rock here. And what that allows for is we call these backed winds. And typically this is what happens when we see a dry line bulge. That's what we call kind of this, almost looks like kind of a nose that's sticking out here. And so as that dry line kind of bulges out, on the north side of that, you get these winds that are almost coming out of the due east. And so what that does is that gives you a little bit better low-level wind shear. This can help to intensify some of those storms and certainly give you a chance at seeing a tornado or two as well. And so it looks like, just based on looking at the model runs here this afternoon, we certainly could see some severe storms tomorrow with a little bit better moisture. And then because that moisture and those winds really start to back on Tuesday, I think very possibly we could see a decent severe weather day across kind of the Panhandle, southwest Oklahoma, and then kind of northwest Texas. I don't think this is going to be something that impacts the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Probably more of those western counties out, maybe Wichita Falls and parts west from there. But I think this is going to be a similar setup of what we're seeing really over much of the next several days. It does look like possibly towards the end of the week, going into the Memorial Day weekend, there could be a little bit better upper level flow from that kind of Pacific jet stream. And so we could see a little bit more severe weather across maybe Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle areas, Saturday, Sunday, Monday time frame. It's still a little too early to know for sure. But I think certainly this overall pattern is going to give more chances of severe weather, kind of multiple days, not huge areas, but certainly as we go forward over the course of this week. And so it does look like it's going to be a more active kind of last 10 days to May. And so again, a little bit too early to know specifics this far out, but definitely have a way to kind of monitor the weather as we move through this week. And if you happen to be in any of these areas, certainly make sure that you have a way to get watches and warnings and kind of have that plan in place, as we always talk about. So hope everybody has a good rest of your Sunday, and hope this video was helpful kind of looking at the pattern that's setting up here for kind of this last 7 to 10 days here in May. So everybody have a good Sunday, and I'll see you back for the next video.